Good afternoon, everybody. Chag Chanukah Sameach. Welcome to today's Pirke Abot class. We are doing Perek 5, Mishnah 14. And today's class is dedicated for Refuah Shlema for Rachel Bat Zohar. And it is dedicated, what should I say from you and your... Anonymous, okay. Anonymously, in honor of Anonymous's mother. In honor of Anonymous's husband's mother. Baruch Hashem. The main thing is that the zechut should be for her, for Refuah Shlema. Hazaku Baruch to you and to your dear husband. I'll do Be'ezrat Hashem Refuah Shlema at the end of the class also. We'll do the tefillah, okay? There are 4 measurements, 4 types amongst those that go to the Beit HaMidrash, those that go to study. We've had many Mishnayot in a row, each one typifying the 4 elements or the 4 types of givers or the 4 types of students or the 4 types of whatever. This is the 4 types of people who come to study. You should ask yourself which one is you, okay? Because we're in a class now. This, I guess, would be a great opportunity for self-reflection. Holech ve'eno oseh. One who goes but does nothing. Sechar halicha biyado. At least he went. Right? He went and he did nothing. At least he went.
What does it mean nothing?
Excellent. That's the question I was waiting for. What does it mean, does nothing? What does that mean? You came to the class. What does it mean you did nothing? You went to sleep. So we have one example, you went to sleep. Excellent. So we're going to see that there are 2 interpretations to this does nothing. And we're going to go through the Mishnah using both lenses. And I think each one of them will yield a little bit of a different understanding. So a guy who goes to the Beit Midrash, he goes to the study hall, or a woman goes to the Beit Knesset to study, and they do nothing. You still walked. Now one might ask, what is the point of walking if you did nothing? What do you mean sechar halicha? The reward of walking? What's the reward of walking? Could you imagine you pay a mover to come move your stuff from Manhattan to Deal for the summer, to move to the Hamptons, to move down the block, whatever. And the mover comes and they call you back later that day and they say, I'm really sorry, came to your house. We didn't actually move anything, but we did come. We just showed up. We were there, but we didn't go in. We didn't move anything. We're just wondering if there's any way you could pay us for coming. What does schar halicha mean? What does that mean? You did nothing. We'll see. Oseh ve'eno holech. Someone who does, ve'eno holech, but he did not go. What does that mean? Schar ma'aseh biyado. That person has the reward of ma'aseh, of an action. He did something. He did whatever doing means. He did that, but he doesn't have the reward of the halicha, of going there. Holech ve'oseh, if he goes and he does, chasid. This is the guy. All right? He went, he did. We don't know what he went. We don't know what it means that he did, but it sounds pretty good, right? The guy went, he did, fantastic. Finally, lo holech ve'lo oseh, obviously, the guy doesn't go, he doesn't do rasha. This guy's wicked. Okay. This guy's wicked. All right. So when I get my voice is very low. So when I get hoarse, sometimes you get words that don't actually register on the human, on the human decibel levels. But dogs understand me. Okay, fine. So what's amazing about this Mishnah is the 2 ways that one could understand what the doing means. And it's interesting because the context of the doing here is in the context of studying. We're talking about someone who goes to the study hall. So going to the study hall means traveling there. Doing, one would assume, means doing what one does in a study hall, which is studying. But if anyone here speaks a language, you'd know that this is a poor way of, sorry, I want to help you, but I have nothing. Here. Okay. Right? There's a better way of saying, if you meant to study, how would you say study in Hebrew? How do you say learn? Lomed. So if that's what you meant, the Mishnah should say, holech, someone who goes, ve'eno lomed. He does not learn. It doesn't say that. It says someone who goes and doesn't do. So the context would indicate that someone who goes and doesn't study. So let's first go with that interpretation, okay? Which some of the commentators actually go with. So let's learn the Mishnah again. Holech ve'eno oseh. Someone who goes to the study hall and does not study. At least he went. Does that jive? Does that make sense?
At least you were thinking to study. This is giving it.
At least he was thinking. Okay, so his intentions were good. Great. Spending time in a kosher environment, that's a good one, right? You could be in a bad place. You could be, I don't know, in a casino, gambling, drunk, smoking a cigar with the wrong woman who's not your wife. You could be doing all sorts of terrible things. And you know what? You're sleeping in Bet Midrash. Right? You slept in the synagogue. So you know what? Not too bad. Does that work for you? No, I don't like it. You get the reward for going. Come on, at least it's not in a bad environment. I get it.
It's like half credit.
I think it's right, but turned inside out like a sock. It's not that let's reward you because you weren't in a worse place. Not that. I think that there's something that happens to a person who walks to the shul and falls asleep in the synagogue. I think something happens to that person. When you come to class at 3 o'clock on a Shabbat afternoon, 3 o'clock p.m. Shabbat afternoon is not a time people should be awake. It is a time whether you are a constituent of a synagogue or a rabbi, you should be asleep. You should be having Shabbos shluf. And Jessica, we need to talk about this. The temperature in that midrash needs to be much colder on Shabbat afternoon. It's nice and toasty. We have like cholent weighing us down, right? It's too easy to fall asleep. But tell me, because you have fallen asleep in my class. I know, I've seen. I have fallen asleep in my class. I'm just really skilled at carrying on speaking while I'm asleep, right? Is it a positive thing that you've done? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's a positive thing. Let me take it out of the realm of spirituality for a minute so we see this idea. Imagine every single day I go to the gym at 6:30. I'm saying imagine because that is not a realistic thing, okay? But I'm just saying, imagine you know how I got there? I probably got to a stage where I'm in the gym every day, not by starting at max power, getting into the gym 6:30, hitting the gym as best I can. Probably I got there on a couple of week workouts. And probably I got there and I built it up a little bit more. Is there a value if I'm really tired one day and my workout partner says, I'm ready to go, you ready? I'm coming to pick you up. I'm not going to be able to work out. Is there a value in the person saying, look, whatever you do, just come. If you break your continuity, you're not going to come tomorrow either. Sometimes there's a value in being somewhere, even if you do nothing with the thing that you went to do. You came to a cooking with a cause in the Bet Knesset where they're packing meals for poor people. And you know what? You didn't pack. You sat and you kibitzed and you schmoozed. You showed support. You came. There was more bodies in the room. You gave support to other people by them seeing that the room is full. The fact that someone goes to something, even if they don't get that job done, there's a positive value in and of itself. And that's what the Mishnah is teaching us here. You came to the synagogue, you were too tired to pray, it doesn't matter. Hashem sees that you came and you tried. That's schar halicha. Now, on a literal level, it means how far did you walk? Did you walk to the synagogue? Did you step with your feet? How many pedometer steps? That's how much reward you get in the Shamayim. Okay? I remember once someone, you want to hear something remarkable? There was this guy who I went to yeshiva with. Do you know someone, they're a little simple. They're not the sharpest tool in the shed, but they have the biggest heart in the whole world. You know someone like that? Yeah? This guy, he studied with me in yeshiva. He wasn't as smart maybe as everyone in the gang. You know, but he had a heart, his nature was so much better than all of us. And one day, this is so beautiful. The guy tells me, he goes, I'm really sorry I came back late today from, for lunch. He goes, I went to pray. He went to pray on the Shabbat after morning in some synagogue way off. I don't even know where it was, like maybe 2 miles away. I asked him, I was like, why'd you pray so? We were in Jerusalem. You can't throw a rock without hitting a synagogue in Jerusalem, right? There's like 9 shuls between here and where you went. Why did you go all the way? And the guy said, I'll tell you the truth, he said. I'm a little bit nervous about something. Something's going on in my family. I didn't sleep at all last night. He says, I knew I was going to get to shul and I was going to be exhausted. I wasn't going to be able to concentrate at all. He says, but I remember that we learned that there's the reward of walking, of going to a synagogue. He says, so I thought of the furthest synagogue that I could walk to and get back to in time for lunch, and I walked there. So at least I merited a long walk to shul. Now, I don't know if that's right or wrong up here, but that's right over here. Put in the effort in the halicha. You didn't make it today, next time you'll make it. There's an amazing pasuk that was taught to us by King David. King David says, I wanted to go shopping, but my legs carried me to the Bet HaKnesset. What does that mean? I went to go to the gym, and where did I wind up? Bet HaKnesset. You ever drive somewhere and space out on the phone and drive somewhere else? Has anyone ever done that? Right? It happens especially all the time. If you're doing like a school run, or you drive to the same place every day, and then you go somewhere and you forget, and what happens? What's that called? Routine. Literally muscle memory. Your routine takes you, propels you to do something you've done a bunch of times. If you keep coming to the synagogue, even if you kind of thought you wanted to go somewhere else, your legs will take you there. So the idea of making yourself used to going to the gym at 6:30 in the morning, even if you don't hit the machine so hard every day, you'll be in the right place. And then the time will come where you'll feel a little bit better and you'll get on this treadmill and you'll do your run and you'll lift your weights and you'll do your thing, you'll be healthy. If you keep shopping in the store that has all of the junk and brownies and cookies, if that's where you're going to shop, eventually your willpower breaks down. And even if you're buying the salad today, tomorrow, the next day, the time's going to come you stop buying. You shop in the good store, what will happen is that routine will ultimately pay dividends. So what schar halicha means, my friend in Israel, he thought it meant only the amount of steps that you take. And maybe there's some truth to that. But I think what the Mishnah is teaching us here is that it's not one sort of destination. It's a journey that we're on. And today I might not be in the zone, but tomorrow I might be. Sechar halicha biyado. He has the merit of embarking on the journey, of deciding, you know what, I don't miss Shabbat class. Even if today I'm so tired, the odds are I'm going to fall asleep, I'm keeping my streak going, because if I'm the person that doesn't miss Shabbat class, then you know what happens? Odds are, more times than not, I'll gain something from it. Okay? Sechar halicha biyado. How many times is this something which is applicable in the life of each and every one of us day to day? Creating good habits. Creating good habits. Going for a walk. Deciding if you're going to go for lunch somewhere and you want to make sure that you're staying healthy. If it's going to be a little bit of a treat, like they say, a naughty treat, with too much calories and sugar and fat, decide you're going to walk there and back. In a nice way. That's creating a good habit. Is it going to take off all the calories? Not gonna, doesn't matter. Don't think of it that way. Create a good habit. Create a good habit. Ultimately, our lives are dominated so much more by the unconscious or by the subconscious than by the conscious. We make a certain finite number of superconscious decisions every day. But when it comes to the unconscious or subconscious decisions that we make, those are happening all the time. Half the time without us even realizing. So the Mishnah is giving us a push towards paying attention to the subconscious decisions that we make. You have, Seely, we talked about this many times, having a tzedakah box in the house. Even if you're not going to give any more tzedakah because of it, it's there all the time. It will encourage a new mode of behavior. You're going to have some money in your pocket. Instead of putting it in the junk drawer, where you're going to put it? Where things go to die, right? You find a letter from 1982 from the gas station, from the gas company, right? You take that money and you put it towards something beneficial for someone. That's creating good habits. And even if in this minute right now, it's not something which is so important, it's something that will become important. When a person is choosing an apartment to rent or to buy, choose one that's close to the shul. Even if right now your husband, you're not so into it. You're creating something that ultimately, schar halicha, as the journey progresses, will become important. Buy Jewish books, even ones that you won't read. Someone mentions a great book, just buy it. Even if you have a stack of books, you know what? Because the time will come where you'll need to buy something, and you know what you'll buy instead? Instead, on your way to the airport, instead of grabbing a book from your shelf that you haven't read that's going to add value to your life, you'll go and buy some drek, like they say in Jewish, right? From the airport, what's it called? From the airport commission stand, which is not going to add even one, an iota of value to your life. Some fairy tale of something or whatever. These are the things, creating opportunities for even when we're not consciously doing great things is an unbelievable beneficial practice. But he's got schar halicha. The Mishnah continues. What about someone who studies, but ve'eno olech, he doesn't go to the Beit Midrash. He doesn't go to the study hall. Schar ma'aseh biyado. This guy has the reward of the action in his hand. Now, let's hit pause again. 1 second. So a guy goes to synagogue. A woman goes to a synagogue. She wants to go hear a class. She hears the class. What was the end game here? The end game was to go and study the class. So what happens if the class that she studied, or the Torah that she learned, or the Mishnah that she looked into, she did it at home? What difference does it make? Schar ma'aseh biyado, that sounds like you still haven't climbed the peak. The next one is the peak. You got to go and study. Why do I have to go and study? Why can't I stay and study? You can have a staycation. Why can't you have a stay class? Yeah.
But that's like Zoom, if you think about it.
Okay.
Right?
It's exactly like Zoom.
Zoom became an opportunity, but not a reality.
But when you go, you're actually surrounded by it.
So let me tell you what Zoom was. Yes. I have refused to Zoom from the moment I could refuse to Zoom because of this Mishnah. This Mishnah. The first time I was able to stop Zooming, I stopped Zooming. People ask me all the time to give speeches for their organizations on Zoom, and I say, nope. You want me to come in person and it works out? Happy to do so. We do not want to encourage people to continue being on Zoom. During the pandemic, Zoom was the very best thing ever. It saved people's lives. It gave them inspiration. It gave them hope. It was unbelievable, Zoom, for that scenario. You know what we call that? We call that lichatechila b'di'evid. You know what that means? Lichatechila means in the best way. B'di'evid means not in the best way. Like, okay, in the first place, in the second place. Yeah, it's the best of the worst. When we were in the worst, may we not be in the worst ever again. We hate you, Omicron. You are not welcome in this country or anywhere in this world. All right? In the worst, Zoom was the best. But in the best, when we can be interacting in person, it's the worst. We live in a world which is graduating and gradiating from interpersonal to digital to impersonal at the speed of light. The amount of hours that people are spending on their phone, and I'm not even talking about bad things on their phone. I'm not talking about negative things on their phone, whether it's inappropriate or whether it's vain or whether it's making you feel bad about yourself or whether it's comparing or jealousy. I'm not even talking about the bad stuff. I'm even talking about just stuff. We're spending more and more and more and more time trapped in a box and less and less time interacting with the world. We would rather watch shows about nature than actually walk in the park and see it. It's much more comfortable. I just sit on my couch. I can be eating popcorn while I'm watching. The time is going to come when we're going to be sitting there eating chocolate, watching other people work out in the gym. We're going to eat chocolate and watch other people eat salad. Right? It's nuts what's going on here. We want to watch, you think about it. We watch action movies and what's it called? And rom-coms and dramas and this and that. Is there not enough drama in your life? Do you not have action in your life? Is there not romance in your... Go get it! Don't watch someone else faking it on a screen. Go get it! So Zoom is the worst of the best. As much as we can interact with people on a human level. And by the way, no, it's not the same even when you see their face on Zoom. It's the best of the worst, but it's the worst of the best. And the more we train our brains to be looking like this at a screen, the more our brains and our bodies, as we learned from the beginning of the Mishnah, do it without us even asking. In the beginning, you looked at your phone when your phone rang. How many times you catch yourself now just checking your phone to see if something came in? Do I have a message? Was there a missed call? It's psychotic. Imagine you're living in your house and your husband or your brother or sister, you hear the door slam and you hear the door open again. They come back and you say, "Where have you been?" "Oh, I was just checking the mailbox. See if the mail came." 10 minutes later, slam, open. "Where'd you go now?" "Oh, I was just checking the mailbox." Could you imagine someone doing like a yo-yo? That's us. We're yo-yos. But the more we train ourselves to do on there, and by the way, your parking now is on your phone. You're doing your taxes on your phone. You're doing checking the sports on your phone. You're doing your shopping. You don't go to, which idiot, what loser would go to a grocery store now when it can be delivered directly to your house? And you can save so much time for more wasting time on your phone. It's wild. Okay? So Zoom is terrible. It's terrible. Everything online is terrible, he said to his phone that was recording him. You missed it, catch up on YouTube. You didn't miss it. That's why, by the way, we're not putting this live. I want people here. You want to have people come have a conversation. You want people to socialize. How else do people help people if they don't meet people? How else do people set up people who are dating if they are not meeting people? When you meet someone at a dinner, you think, oh, this great guy, I thought of for you, this great girl, yeah, fantastic. How often does that happen at the end of an Instagram conversation? Or a Zoom? It doesn't happen because it's missing that personal touch. Human beings evolve, we progress when we are with one another. And nowhere is that more evident than in conversation. Have you ever seen a conversation online, on social media? Ever seen them? There's actually a law. I forget the name of the law. Google this afterwards. I forget the name of the law. Williams maybe law? Jessica, maybe Google this. I think it's within 10 interactions. There's a law on social media that within 10 interactions in a conversation, someone will be compared to Hitler. Yeah? You ever see these conversations about politics? Conversations about anti-Semitism? Conversations about racism? Conversations about whatever? The rhetoric and how people speak to one another online, it's not to be believed. It's almost, sorry? Goodwin's law. Is it 13 steps? How many interactions is it, back and forth? Yeah? Now, what's interesting to me is that I've actually stopped. I don't do this anymore. If someone will ask me like a question or for my opinion on a hot button topic, I just won't do it on social media. You know why? No point. Within 3 seconds, some social justice warrior, like signaling, look at me, look at how great I am. Rabbi, that's incredibly insensitive. You're being incredibly insensitive to people who were born on Tuesday with 2 left hands, who like ice cream, specifically in the flavor of carrots. There's a lot of us today, you know, and we're not taking it anymore. Do you understand? This is what the world out there looks like now. You cannot have any sort of normal conversation because there's no tone, there's no humanity, and the ability to attack someone over a comment is so easy. You don't see their face. You're not seeing them as a human being or as a person. So the Mishnah is telling you, pre-internet, if you could ever remember that there was such a time. Do you guys remember that? When losers had something called Encyclopedia Britannica? Right? It was all of us. You wanted to know something. Goodwin's Law? Let me look that up. G, remember that? Right? Then there was G1, G2, G3. Right? There's 6 different volumes within G till you found Goodwin's Law, etc. Right? And then you finally found it. And it's like C. Goodwin's Law. And you had to go back and find the other version, the other name for that same thing. Okay? Now, Google, in split second, Google is like 900 trillion results have been found. It's crazy. We saw all of this happen not even in all of our lives. You know, I was half of the age I am now, roughly, when the internet began. And you had that weird startup noise that all the phones made when you're... Yeah, AOL. You've got mail. Remember that? Right? It's crazy. But even before that, the Mishnah says, don't learn at home. You know why? Because however smart you are, you will only remain however smart you are when you learn by yourself. You might be exposed to great ideas, but ultimately you will see those great ideas through the prism of your own experience. You have no other context other than the context of self. You just don't understand it. You don't get it. Could you imagine someone who never had money being told by the Mishnah that money is as much or more of a challenge, having money, than not having money? The person who doesn't have it looks at the other person as like, yeah, please, that sounds like a ridiculously difficult challenge, you know? Chas v'shalom, that should never happen to me. But the other person also doesn't understand the other person's context. If you ever needed proof for this, I offer you as proof the concept of glamping, where very wealthy people spend a lot of money to live in tents. And they think that it's so cool and it's very glamorous to live in a tent. So they get 900, thread count sheets with an air conditioner, right, in a tent, because they really want to find that experience to be one with nature. Yeah, it's always one context seeking to understand the other context. It's out of their realm of possibility. They don't know it. But vice versa is also true. Right? Is this clear? I love the idea of a guy spending $6,000 to fly first class to Israel only in order to have an authentic camel riding experience. Right? And I wanted to say, because sometimes you go and you're on a bar mitzvah trip and you're with people who have a very affluent means, And I want to just ask them, which seat do you want on the camel? Do you want to sit in the front seat or in the first class bump, or do you want to sit in the back bump? What's the difference? Oh, the first bump gets peanuts and the back bump gets bamba. Right? People don't understand each other's experiences. But we are immeasurably enriched when we interact with people. Two people hear the exact same thing, and what do they hear? The opposite to one another. Do you guys remember? I don't know if some of you might remember my favorite example of this. My daughter was making trouble, and my wife said to her, if you carry on, you do one more, do it again once more, right? You're not going to get Shabbos treats. There are very few threats that carry more weight in the eyes of a child than you're not going to get Shabbos treats. Okay? But my daughter was bold. She knew what she wanted to do. And she went ahead and made the trouble. And my wife said, okay, now you can't have a Shabbos treat. A short while later, I'm in the kitchen. And my daughter says, can I have a Shabbos treat? I said, what do you mean? Did you not forget said earlier exchange? And she said, Mommy said I could have a Shabbos treat later. What did Mommy say? Now you can't have a Shabbos treat. Not smart. That's what she heard. Yeah. Okay? The context of two different people, incredulously looking at one another, is that what you heard? Because that's not what he said. It comes from the place that people are just in opposite sides.
It's called coding and decoding.
Coding and decoding. I thought you meant coding because, the guys. I remember once there was a couple that was having some very difficult challenges. And I advised them to go see a specific person, a therapist. And the therapist gave them advice. And each of them independently called me and said, oh, Rabbi, I can't thank you enough. I went to the therapist, I felt so validated. I was like, really, why? He said, well, basically the therapist said that it's her fault. I was like, oh, okay. I'm just going to sit here and wait for your wife to call me and tell me the same thing. Within 10 minutes. Rabbi, thank you so much for sending us. This is the perfect therapist. I think he's really going to get through to him. I was like, oh, why would you say that? She says, because he basically said that it's his fault. They were both in the room at the same time. They both heard the same words.
Said it's both their faults. And
The therapist probably said something ambiguous like, everybody knows in a relationship which things are their fault. And both of them like, sister. That's probably how it went down. I wasn't there, and probably he can't tell me because it's client-patient privilege or whatever. I don't know what it's called, doctor-patient privilege, right? But it's amazing. The nature of understanding being so pronounced, the difference being so pronounced based on the different characters. You know, in the class the other day that we talked about on Chanukah, I don't know if you guys heard the class from Uplighting on Chanukah, the one that we did in the main sanctuary. Very powerful class. I mean, I only got to hear my own, so it was very powerful. I think Rabbi Ruvain's and Rabbi Mizrahi's were also very powerful, but I wasn't there. I was actually not in the room. So, but judging on past performances, I'm sure it was very powerful. But there was one bit that really made an impact on me. It was the realization that Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, when they were giving you the halakha of how you light the Chanukah candles, they were basically just iterating their own personalities. Shammai, that passionate ball of energy. Start with 8. Hillel, that much more timid, much more gentle, much more accepting. Look, if all you have is one candle, I'm sure it's fine. It's remarkable. Says the Mishnah, end of the day, you stayed at home and studied, your only perspective is your own. You need the walls of the Bet Midrash. You need to have a study partner. You need the rabbi. You need to argue it out. You need to hear somebody else. You need to go back and forth. You need to understand, have it sharpened. You know, because if you learn this Mishnah yourself, 3 of you gave interpretations when we just started. If you were just by yourself, what would happen? You'd have your own thought and move on, and that's what it would be. You need to be challenged. You need that other side. Says the Mishnah, if all that's what you've got, schar ma'aseh biyado. You have the reward of study. But ultimately, you don't have the reward of halicha. You didn't go, you didn't hear, you just learned. Not only that, you also don't have any sacrifice. Walking towards the Bet Midrash also is a euphemism for walking towards another person's perspective. Moving towards someone else. I'm not saying you need to stand where they stand. You're allowed to have your own position on everything. But moving towards. At least an understanding of. So, oseh ve'eno holech, schar ma'aseh biyado. The Mishnah then says, holech ve'oseh, chasid. Ideal is a person who goes and who studies. He understands other people. He hears what they have to say. He incorporates that into his understanding of the world. Can I make this point? And I've made it many times before. Should a Jewish person be a Republican or a Democrat? Bum, 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 bum. In Rabbi Farhi's final class as Rabbi of Edmund J. Safra, he asked what could be considered a contentious question. Yes?
No, I said it's according to the Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel.
According to Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel. Okay. Anyone else? You know why nobody's answering? Because everyone's afraid
I'm not afraid.
of what other people might say. Go.
I mean, Jews tend to be Democrats because they feel that if you pick a position where it's contrary to the Torah or to what you are accustomed to, it could possibly come back to haunt you. So if you're anti-Muslim or you have a ban on this or if you do this, they have that mentality, the diaspora mentality, that one day it will come back to us. However, they forget that the other end of the spectrum, which is Republican, which is more of a conservative view on everything, does not take that same stance. It's not that it will happen to me. If you're religious, you're religious. You obey, whatever law or religion that you want to, and accept the others for what they want. But the Democratic view, which is quote-unquote liberal, does not have that same open-heartedness to accept other views. It's their way or the highway, and that's it. There you go.
So Jews should be Democrat? What's the end of that?
Should they be? No.
What should they be?
They should be
Republican.
What the values, whatever the Torah.
Whatever the Torah teaches. Yes. I love that.
Now or you talking Democrat?
Right now. I'm stirring the pot on purpose. Things have evolved. Should not be Democrat. Should not be Republican. Yes.
A lot of Democrats became Republicans. Exactly.
Can I make a point? Jews should be nothing, like you ended. Jews should be Jews. By the way, let's modify that for a second. What should Muslims be? Muslims. What should liberal people be? Liberal. It's not a sports team, Democrats. My father was a Yankee fan. I'm going to be a Yankee fan. Whether we win or we lose, still go for the Yankees. In sports, that works. Could you imagine someone voting for the team that their father went for just because their father went for it, even if they really stink and they never win? Could you imagine adopting an idea like that for government or politics? Well, I know that you might think that you can't imagine it, but that's actually what's occurring. People will choose to vote along, they call it party lines, without ever actually asking themselves, what is this person? What do they say? What do they stand for? Could there be a possibility that I, as a consistent Republican, might vote Democrat this time round, or as a consistent Democrat would vote Republican this time round? That is actually intellectual and moral and ethical honesty. It's got nothing to do with the jersey, what t-shirt they're wearing, okay? Why am I asking you this? Because I think that this is a really powerful way of looking at this concept. Holech ve'oseh chasid. You walk to the synagogue. You took into account other people's perspectives. And then you studied. I see in this some sort of a central path, some sort of a polarizing, a balance where you don't listen to everything everybody else says because you study yourself. And you also don't listen to your own research exclusively because maybe you're not hearing anyone else's point of view. Go out, hear, listen, understand, and make up your own flipping mind. That's what the Mishnah is telling you. And I think that in some ways it's a funny commentary on the world when we say, yeah, a person who accepts or learns other people's opinions, a person who makes the effort and the sacrifice to be able to have, a knowledge which is tested. You know what I call going to the Bet Midrash to learn instead of learning in your own bedroom? You know what I call that? Fact-checking. You're fact-checking your own knowledge. Today, what can you read that you can believe? Nothing. Nothing. So read at home, do your research, do your learning, and then come, and then hear what other people have to say. And then ultimately, make up your own mind. And it's a sad commentary that in our world, a person that does that, chassid, wow, what a tzaddik this guy, unbelievable. What a tzaddiket, fantastic, free thinker. What used to be completely a normal thing, which was for people to make up their own minds, is now a rarity. It's a wild thing, that. And when people in our society today seem to be kind of counterculture, avant-garde, ultimately, almost always, they are avant-garde with a bunch of other people who are the same avant-garde as them, with the same opinions that are also avant-garde. You understand? They've just joined another political party called counterculture. It's wild, but people aren't thinking. And the proof is, if you ask someone, if you're Republican or Democrat, they should not be able to answer that. You believe in conservative values? Fantastic. You don't believe in helping the poor or the underprivileged? That's a Democrat core value, right? But at the same time, do you believe in taxing people out of productivity and destroying capitalist markets by forcing people to pay the bill for your largesse? Have a nuanced view, for God's sake. You should not be able to answer that question. You could say I skew more or the more likely, but you know what? This should not be a foregone conclusion. The same should be true about your Judaism, about your Torah study. If you sat back and listened to the class, you didn't go on a journey. You didn't walk. You just listened. Don't believe me. Challenge me. And even if you're not going to challenge me to my face, that's fine. Challenge me in your head. Figure it out. Does this make sense?
So if you just
And if it doesn't, ask. Yeah?
if you just believe it means we don't study.
I didn't say it doesn't mean you don't study. The Mishnah said you're a good person. Schar ma'aseh biyado. Right? Or schar halicha biyado. But you don't have the full package.
But why would they call
You don't have the full package, huh?
Why would they say Rasha? If you
No. The last one is, I'm not willing to study anything. And also, you know what else? I'm also unwilling to take any steps towards. The only way you have a person who's consciously, who's deciding, I refuse to change an iota. I will not learn. I will not go. I won't even check it out. That's a person who's so married to his own or her own perspective. And I think that that's what the Mishnah is teaching you. That doesn't make you a Rasha. It just means that for all intents and purposes, there is no possible way that you will not be a Rasha. Think about a person who is completely inflexible. A person who is completely driven against any sort of learning for self-development. They refuse to learn. They refuse to grow. They refuse to listen to anybody else. They're Rasha, not because they didn't listen, not because they had that refusal, but because what does that person's life look like when they enter into any sort of conflict? What kind of person are they in the business world? What kind of husband, what kind of wife is that person? That's a Rasha husband and a Rasha wife, an insensitive person, a person who's always looking to make things work for them. That's what the Mishnah means. If you're not working on yourself, by definition you're a Rasha, not because of the absence of work, but because of what happens to a person who doesn't work on themselves, who's unwilling to be flexible at all or to grow at all. That person 100% of the time is going to make decisions based on what is best only for them. You know who else makes decisions like that? Goodwin? Hitler. No, I'm joking. You see, that's what he said. That's the idea. The idea is that that path only takes you in one direction. Okay? Now that we've learned the Mishnah, according to this opinion, I just want to introduce a second opinion. And we're not going to go through the Mishnah again from the beginning, because I'll leave that to you to adapt. You guys will have Sechar Halicha, the reward of walking, the journey, the effort that you put in to kind of understanding it or working it out yourself. I just want to change one word now. As we started, Holech means you go, ve'eno oseh. You know what oseh means here? You do not do. What's the context of do have to do with going to a study hall?
You don't implement it. You
Excellent.
Just sit in here and you don't do
Hear and don't change. You hear, you go to study.
You don't challenge.
You don't do. No. The rabbi gives a very long class about the importance of forgiving. The rabbi gives a very long class about charity. The rabbi gives a very long class about shalom bayit, about working with a spouse, about understanding your children, about respecting your parents. And you know what? You go to every class, but you just don't do any of it. This Mishnah can also be understood in the context of do. Now, the first opinion, you know why it translates do as learn, even though, like grammatically, that like the Mishnah shouldn't have worded it that way? It should have said, a person who goes and doesn't learn. Eno lomed. Oseh ve'eno, lomed ve'eno holech. He learns, doesn't go. Holech ve'lomed. Lo holech ve'lo lomed. It should have said lomed. The other opinion, you know what? You know how they're translating this? They're saying, no, it means you don't take action. So why didn't the first opinion also translate the word do according to what it actually means, which is do, act? And the answer is because the opening sentence of the Mishnah is, there are 4 types of holche bet hamidrash. There are 4 types of people who go to the study hall. So the entire box that we're working with is people who go to the study hall. It's not the box of people who then do whatever they do. That's another Mishnah. That's another lesson. We're talking about here, what types of goers to the Bet Midrash are there? But I say that the second opinion would argue that there is a fundamental difference between someone who goes to do and someone who goes not to do. And that difference is not only manifest in what happens after the session, it's also manifest in what happens in it. I'd like to prove it. Can anyone remember the following number? 72764697777. And yet, every time someone says that to you in an answering machine, because I gave you the exact number of numbers that you would need in order to call them, somehow you manage to remember it. Not for very long. For how long do you remember it? As long as it takes for you to put it down on your phone. If someone asked you that number 3 minutes later, could you recall it? No. How long does your brain hold on to it for? Exactly as long as it needs to. Does any of you remember the number of a really good friend from back home when you were kids? Yeah? Yeah? Show off.
3778842. Like you.
Who's that?
My mother's house.
Your mother's house. Mine, 732-531-4872. My friend Aaron Dweck, 531-1082. He had two numbers, 531-1082 and 531-4037. My friend the Shoners, 222-0013. My friend the Semachs, 222-6437. Why do I remember that? Because back then, you learned the number to remember forever. So when you imprinted it in your brain, the aim of that imprinting in your brain was forever. When you imprint a number for 5 seconds so you could get it down on your phone, how long does it last in your brain? 5 seconds. You go to a class and you have no intention of doing, how long does the information stay in your head?
5 minutes.
Gone. Why? Because I had no intention of retaining this. After all, I wasn't planning on doing anything with it.
It's a bracha levatala.
If you're planning on doing something with it, what happens? Your brain says to itself, this is the kind of thing I need to remember. And then your brain remembers it. So I think the second opinion would argue that actually, whether you're planning on doing or not doing, is also a function of how you approach, how you go to the class. You have a kid who does not like Judaism. Anyone have one of those? Friend doesn't like the whole thing. I don't buy it. You got to convince them, well, come, listen to my rabbi. My rabbi is great. Come. Anyone's got a friend like that? Anyone schlepped someone to a class ever before?
As a teacher in Israel, I can tell you that I had so many students who were against it.
Against Judaism.
Against Judaism.
So many.
I asked for them every Friday. I wanted to do the parasha. No, we don't care about it. Why are you doing this to us?
So many people like that. So you finally manage to convince this person to come to a class. You go to the class and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so inspiring. This is so wonderful. I love the rabbi's class. And you turn to them and the guy's like, eh. Yeah? And then they'll pull out of the 1 hour that the rabbi spoke, the one comment that they didn't like. Is that not what happens? The one comment that they didn't like in the whole hour, that's what they walked out. I don't agree with these people that say this, that, or the other. Anyone that could say that Jews don't have to be Democrats, not my cup of tea. Or Republican, not my cup of tea. But you have people like that. Why? Because they went to the class against their will, not to learn, not to do, only to shut this friend up who keeps bothering them. So they go to the class thinking, what can I find that will get me out of coming here ever again? And the brain's really good at doing what it really wants to do.
That's all the media does with the politics.
Sorry?
That's all the media does with the politics.
Exactly the case. Right? Exactly the case. You have someone from the other side of the aisle that you don't like. Again, if you're a Republican, Shema Yisrael, the minute Nancy Pelosi comes on TV, you're snarling at the screen. Oh, go, yeah, oh, go. Sure, go, tell them, they're ridiculous. She could be telling you the date, you're like, you made that up. Right? That's how it is. That's how it is. If Donald Trump came on TV in a Democrat household, if they let him even talk before they switch the channel, right? Again, the man could be singing the national anthem. What a dog. Sky. Look at him singing the national anthem. You understand? The brain is really good at doing what it wants to do. So the Mishnah reads, Holech ve'eno oseh. You went to the Beit Midrash, but you didn't do. You didn't want to actually take anything from it in a practical sense. You didn't want to change. You don't want to change. Says the Mishnah, Schar halicha biyado. You still did something great. You know why? Because the heart, unfortunately, doesn't operate exactly the way that we want. I'm fond of quoting the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon says, V'samtem et devarai ele, and you will place these words al levavchem on your heart. And the question that everybody asks is, why does it say on your heart? It should say in your heart. And the answer that the Vilna Gaon gave, which is by now famous, is he says, it doesn't say in your heart because it's really difficult to put stuff in your heart when your heart isn't open. So what do? You stack stuff on the heart. And then something happens and the heart opens, and what falls in? All the stuff that you've prepared that's just sitting there waiting for that moment. You know?
So these people aren't wicked, their heart is just closed. Their heart's not open.
Closed. I don't think anybody's wicked.
No, but even this person, I mean, their heart isn't open, so how can they can't be also held accountable for the fact that they don't want to.
No, but they're choosing to close their heart.
Are they choosing to close their heart?
They're not.
To some degree, but not necessarily. Can I give you an example? What if someone had a horrible upbringing? Let's say a guy went to school and his Jewish studies teacher beat the living daylights out of him. And then every day came into class and talked about chesed. And he was a serial abuser. What a terrible person this guy is for not wanting to love Judaism. Right? This person is they're not closing anything. They had trauma. It's not their fault at all. Any sin that this person does is actually going to accrue to that guy's, bank account in Shamayim in heaven. Right? But even that person who's closed, who's angry, what happens? He meets someone who's really, really nice. He meets someone who's Jewish, who actually lives by the principles that they talk about. And then there's a mini thaw. And it melts a little, the ice. And then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And then everything that the person has learned, actually, it's quite interesting. You have someone who learned a lot about Judaism that gets turned off for whatever reason. When they come back to Judaism, it's not like they're starting from nothing. If they decide they want to keep Shabbat now, they already know how. So the Mishnah is telling you, Holech ve'eno oseh, you went but have no intention of doing anything about it, you still have schar halicha. You went. You learned. You did something. The second thing is oseh, he does ve'eno holech. Same problem like we said before. The person's doing it, but he's not actually going. He's not checking his actions and his study based on or against other people's context and their understanding of it. Okay? What the right thing is, what the right approach is. Holech ve'oseh chasid. But finally, lo holech ve'lo oseh rasha. And as I said earlier, when you have someone who doesn't go and who doesn't study, he doesn't do, who doesn't change, he's a rasha. Well, what if there's all sorts of reasons why he's not there or she's not there? The Mishnah is not telling you whether it's their fault or not. Let's say you have someone who was abused. You have someone who had such a terrible experience. And because of that, they become the most selfish, self-absorbed, narcissistic person because of how they were treated. It might not be their fault, but what kind of life will they live? What kind of choices will they make? They will be an inadvertent rasha, right? It won't be their fault. They might not even get punished for it. But they're going to make the life of everyone around them miserable, including themselves. The Mishnah here is not passing judgment. It's just saying this is what will happen. Holech ve'oseh, and I can prove that I'm right. Holech ve'oseh means a person who goes and he studies. A person who goes and he does. That makes you a chassid? What, because you did it once, twice, 5 times? It doesn't make you a chassid now. But this is the chassid road. This is the pious road. And it keeps correcting and correcting and correcting and correcting until you're left with the purest form of self. Hashem should bless us to be constantly in a state of development and growth. Chag Chanukah Sameach.